Otherwise, I think it's time to get started. Thank you all so much for being here, to our tour stops, to board members that are here, and our guests. We have a pared down group this year, but hopefully that facilitates great discussion later on. My name is Ann Gu, and I'm the program manager for Johnson Clean Energy District. If you're not muted, which I can see everyone is, just make sure that you stay muted until the conclusion of all 3 tour stops, where we can then unmute and start our Q&A and discussion section. But this is our 2021 Energy District Tour. We hold one every year, and we focus on celebrating clean energy advances in Johnson County. Us as an organization, Johnson Clean Energy District is a nonprofit that organizes in Johnson County, Iowa, and serves them specifically. Our vision is to expedite the clean energy transition in our communities that ultimately will save community members money, boost local economies, and help draw down greenhouse gas emissions in order to fight climate change. So to contextualize the history of energy districts, if you don't already know, we have here our board president, Craig Mosher, who's going to talk a little bit about how they got started. So Craig, over to you. Craig, you're muted.
Unmute. There we go.
There you go.
You'd think you would learn after how many years on Zoom?
Yeah.
So I'm Craig Mosher. As you said, I grew up here in Iowa City. I'm a social worker by profession. I administered agencies around Eastern Iowa, taught social policy, community development at Iowa and at Luther, up in Decorah. I live in co-housing here in Iowa City. So it's like a condo development, but we are building this with a very small footprint, just duplexes and fourplexes, highly energy efficient buildings, no fossil fuels, and solar on many of the buildings. And I drive an all electric car and just love the thought that I can drive around in my car on sunlight. You know, it's kind of, I like the idea. So let me talk a little bit about just what an energy district is. And they began back in Decorah 10 years ago, when a couple of us from Luther got to talking about some folks, talking with people in the community. Andy Johnson was one of them and has been our leader since then. But we were talking about how to encourage the clean energy transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy, so that we would deal with climate change and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And so that's been our focus. And the model began with the Winneshiek Energy District, which was the first one. I was on their board for a number of years. And I'll use some examples from that as I talk this morning, because they've been around the longest. But the concept is what we call universal local. And this is the same basic concept that was used to start the soil and water conservation districts, which are now all over the country. And it's universal because the model is the same in each county. And it's local because these are local nonprofit organizations. They're county-based, and they have local citizen boards that serve local needs. And they're inclusive. There's an attempt to be sure that we include all members of the community, including folks with low income, seniors, veterans, folks with disabilities, and so forth. So that universal local concept is basically the model for energy districts, which we hope to sort of build out in the same way. So our basic goal is to accelerate the transition to a clean energy economy. And that means an economy that's free of fossil fuels and carbon pollution. So the energy district vision is to get to the point where we have 100% local, renewable, efficient energy by 2050. Okay, it's a goal that's been adopted widely by many organizations and countries, but that's our goal as well. And we talk about it as green meets green. And what we mean by that is that you're trying to expand locally owned clean energy prosperity through local ownership of solar panels, keeping the energy dollars here in the local community. And that happens by families and businesses producing their own energy through their own solar panels on their own buildings, or through community solar, which we have to still work on developing, but community solar, which would allow folks who can't put panels on their roofs to buy a share of a large solar field. So this will reduce people's energy bills. Over the long haul, solar energy is considerably cheaper for people than large-scale utility energy, and or coal-fired and gas-fired power plants and so forth. So we're trying to reduce energy bills, particularly for low and moderate income families whose energy burden is too high as a percentage of their income. Notice also that when we do this, that it creates jobs and business growth. And I'll just give you one quick example from Winnebago County, where when we started this 10 years ago, there was one person installing a few solar panels occasionally on somebody's roof. Now there are 6 electric companies, all 6 electric companies in Decorah, in that area, are installing solar panels, and one of them is buying panels by the semi-truckload. So there's been quite a growth in business development, as well as the obvious energy benefits. So we call this green meets green, that the climate stewardship aspect of it, to protect us against climate change, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, also provides substantial economic benefits. So Clean Energy Districts of Iowa is our state organization, and JCED is an association of the 10 energy districts that now exist in Iowa, plus a couple in Wisconsin. We're talking about them joining as well, and we're beginning in Illinois and Minnesota to talk with counties there. So this is a growing kind of a movement. And we're advocating to expand nationwide, and we can talk more about that if you like. That's kind of an exciting prospect, but that's kind of what we're doing. So our goals are really to do energy efficiency, renewable energy, public education, advocacy, and the economic development part of it. So like I said to a few of you this morning, some of us were at the Catholic Worker House installing LED bulbs to reduce their energy bills. In the longer run, many energy districts, and we will eventually also do energy audits for people and propose changes they can make, including insulation, air sealing, things they can hire contractors to do. The renewable energy part builds on those energy audits and suggests people put up solar, or in some cases geothermal. And I did this in Decorah some years ago when the energy district came out, did an audit, and I put up solar panels. And I had years of sunshine driving my energy needs at my home. We also are doing public education, speaking and writing. Energy breakfasts are been a staple of many of the energy districts, and we're starting to do some of those here, or lunches, talking to service clubs, writing op-eds, letters to the editor, things like that. The advocacy includes talking to local and state government and the Iowa Utilities Board. We have some policy experts in the JCED organization who routinely intervene in dockets with the IUB about rate increases, about net metering, about other policies like that. And then the economic development that I talked about, the job creation, it goes beyond electric companies, of course. Plumbers put in heat pump water heaters, contractors do installation work, lumber yards, hardware stores. It generates business for that whole economy. And it keeps the ratepayers' energy dollars local. And so that means that people have more spendable income when their energy bills go down to spend in the local economy. So this is an economic development project as well. And I talked about SETI and what they do, and we could talk some more about that if anybody's interested, how we might expand that. So why don't I stop here and let's go on with the tour.
Thanks so much for that, Craig. It's always exciting to hear how these organizations that you end up supporting in the long term got started, and humble beginnings up in Decorah, all that's very, very interesting. So JCED as an organization, and Craig covered this a little bit, we came together personally in 2018 as a group of concerned climate advocates responding directly to the call for energy efficiency expansion that was laid out in the Iowa City Climate Action Plan. There was a need for it, and that was acknowledged, and this group of advocates wanted to come together and actually be able to expedite that process, because we all want a more sustainable Iowa. Over the short lifetime of the organization, we've been able to accomplish quite a bit. We've worked with the University of Iowa and the City of Iowa City to develop a solar energy study and report to help inform the proliferation of solar power in the future for the city. We've developed a pay it forward program, as we call it, and that allows both organizations or institutions through large grants as well as individual one-to-one donations to essentially directly purchase energy efficient materials and pay it forward to a neighbor that would most likely benefit from that reduced cost burden. We also have begun installing a lot of energy efficiency materials throughout the county that, by our estimates, at the end of installation, they'll be able to reduce greenhouse gas emissions up to 80 metric tons annually, just through small energy efficiency measures like light bulbs and shower heads. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, and all of our work is supported by contributions from both individuals and large grants from organizations like Hills Bank, the City of Iowa City, the Community Foundation of Johnson County, as well as environmental advocates. So the purpose of this tour specifically, that's held every year, it's an opportunity for local policymakers, businesses, community leaders such as yourselves, and other organizations to learn about, discuss, and celebrate clean energy successes in Johnson County. And we believe that events like these can help build relationships between local organizations and community leaders to help expedite the clean energy transition in our communities. We hope that we can continue to move forward with a common goal and identity that is a clean energy community, built around that concept that Craig was talking about of green meets green, or put more simply, clean energy stewardship and economic prosperity go hand in hand. So today's tour, we're going to be hearing from 3 excellent tour stops. First, we're going to be hearing from Daniel Bissell, who is the climate action analyst for the City of Iowa City. And he is going to be talking about the new electric buses that the city has added to the fleet, as well as private vehicle charging opportunities throughout the city. Next, we will be hearing, traveling all the way to North Liberty, where we are going to be talking to a local resident, Roger Egenberg, and he's going to share his experience with his new residential solar installation purchased through the Solarize group buy in 2020. And then lastly, we're going to be hearing from Deb Scholerman. She is a Green Sanctuary team member and a Land Ministry team member at the Unitarian and Universalist Society of Coralville. And she'll be sharing details about their new green facility that they've built recently and the accomplishments that they'll be able to make because of that move. So to start, I will invite Daniel to begin his presentation.
All right, you should be able to see my PowerPoint presentation now. Is that coming through?
Looks great, Daniel.
All right, first I want to thank JCED for hosting this this event. It's a wonderful opportunity to talk about some successes that have been happening in Johnson County in the area of climate and the environment. And thanks to Ann for the introduction. There is no one silver bullet solution to climate change. And so I'm going to be talking about not just transit or just electric vehicles, but both. So like Ann mentioned, I am relatively new to the climate action analyst position, but I bring with me 20 years experience in public transit between CANBUS, the Kansas City Transportation Authority, and Iowa City Transportation Services. I have always had a personal passion for environmentalism and preventing and mitigating climate change, and I'm super excited to be able to translate that into my professional life and focus on climate issues 100% of the time. So we are at an interesting crossroads in terms of climate policy and environmental policy. Public perception is changing. Climate change is increasingly seen as a problem, even a crisis. Awareness is growing, and there is more of an understanding that personal actions are not enough. Institutions and systems are going to have to change and adapt to this new reality. Cities are uniquely positioned to address climate change in the way that they directly interact with residents on many issues. The average citizen interacts with local government much more frequently than state or federal government. And cities tend to impact certain issues such as transportation policy, energy efficiency, municipal operations, among others. Now here's just a quick timeline of Iowa City's development of the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. In 2007, we joined the U.S. Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement. In 2008, we joined Cities for Climate Protection Campaign. In 2009, we completed our first greenhouse gas inventory. In 2016, we joined the Global Compact of Mayors. And then between 2017 and 2018, the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan was developed. Now, part of the greenhouse gas inventory has shown that any way you look at it, transportation is about 15% of Iowa City's greenhouse gas emissions. However, that is a growing proportion as Mid-American Energy brings more renewables online and the UI power plant moves away from coal. Transportation will continue to become a larger share of total emissions from the community standpoint. Now here's an example of the present transportation modes and some transportation related goals of Iowa City. You can see that 66% of trips in Iowa City are made by car, 10% by public transportation. Those are the two modes that I will be addressing today. But from the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, some of the actions that we identified were replacing 55% of vehicle trips with sustainable transportation options. And that could be public transportation or clean vehicles. among other modes. Increase community-wide adoption of electric and alternative fuel vehicles, and convert 50% of the municipal vehicle fleet to cleaner fuel vehicles. Now, part of the tools that help us get to that are grants. Buses are expensive no matter what powers them. The city can't just go out and buy a bus with their own funds, whether it's diesel, hybrid, or electric. So we need to look for outside sources of funding. The Federal Transit Administration has a low, no emissions grant program. And that's what Iowa City used to purchase the 4 electric buses. That resulted in a $3 million federal grant. And then there are other pools of money necessary in order to buy the buses and the charging infrastructure. So you can see that in addition to the federal low, no emissions grant, we also received funds from the Iowa DOT. And then we did pitch in $1.2 million of local matching funds. So like any electric vehicle, at present, electric buses have a higher purchase price than a diesel bus, but much lower operating costs, including fuel and maintenance. And that is important to consider when you're looking at the total economics of the electrification of transportation. So those combinations of funds turned this dream into this reality. I think this is one of our new ghost buses. It's still in the make ready stage. This month, it will be wrapped with logos and pretty design. It won't just be plain white for long. And then it will hit the streets of Iowa City in January. Some of the features of this bus, it has up to a 329-mile range. You can have 40 or more seated passengers. This bus does have a dual motor design. That's not to say that there's a motor on each axle. There's actually 2 motors on the rear axle. So the rear wheels can be driven independently, which increases efficiency and helps with navigating slippery streets during Iowa winters. This bus is estimated to get about 20.9 miles per gallon equivalent. And to compare with a conventional diesel bus, a diesel bus would get between 4, on a good day, 4.5 miles per gallon of diesel. So this is a huge improvement in efficiency. Now, those grants did not just cover the buses, they also helped cover the charging infrastructure, as well as a partnership with Mid-American Energy to help design and install the charging infrastructure. You can see in the back here, Mid-American did have to install a new transformer to power this equipment. And we did get 2 chargers. The chargers are actually outside of the transit facility. The dispensers are inside, and at the end of this dispenser is the standard CCS1 connector. Now, this is the same connector that you would use if you're driving your Chevy Bolt or Mustang Mach-E on a road trip and stop on the roadside to charge. These are actually loaner chargers. There are some supply chain issues, so we couldn't get the chargers that we picked out immediately. So these are loaned to us from Proterra. Our chargers are slated to get here in February. The existing chargers take about 6 hours to charge the bus from 0 to 100% overnight. The new chargers that we're expecting in February will bring that down to about 4 hours for a complete charge. Here are some of the greenhouse gas benefits, as well as other emissions that cause smog and health problems. You can see greenhouse gas emissions such as carbon dioxide and methane directly from the bus are brought down to 0. Also, those other emissions that cause health problems, particularly in children and the elderly with regards to respiratory disorders and asthma, particulate matter and nitrogen oxides are brought down to 0. Nitrogen oxides are also a component of smog, creating smog pollution, which again impacts negatively human health. So like I mentioned before, there is no silver bullet to tackle climate change. No matter what the level of transit service is, we will still need private cars. Now, most charging of an electric vehicle does occur at home. However, the visibility of publicly available charging opportunities help EV adoption. As people see these charging stations pop up, they think, wait, I park here every day, I can fill up here every day. So that helps encourage adoption. Here's the geographic distribution of Iowa City's EV charging. There's one on every parking ramp. Just for reference, here's Clinton Street here, UI main campus up in the upper left. Here's Gilbert Street, Burlington. So you can see they're distributed throughout downtown, and public charging is available in all Iowa City parking ramps. Currently, there is no additional fee to charge your car. EV drivers must pay the regular parking fee. In July of 2023, the state of Iowa will impose a 2.6 cent per kilowatt hour sort of road use tax. It's like a fuel tax on publicly available charging. So I imagine at that time we will have to pass that along to our customers. Iowa City did participate in the Eastern Iowa EV Readiness Plan, together with Cedar Falls, Cedar Rapids, Davenport, Dubuque, and Waterloo. The consultants who helped us put that plan together determined a sort of magic number to encourage widespread EV adoption is about 450 plugs per million of people population. And the consultant team did determine that Iowa City is just below that mark. We are just about to hit that precipice to have enough publicly available EV charging to tip the scales into widespread adoption. One of the parts of my job is to track demand of our publicly available EV charging. Lately, there has been a proliferation of models. Every manufacturer has a plug-in vehicle, and there's a plug-in vehicle in every vehicle segment. You can see we had steady growth throughout 2019, and then the COVID dip. Parking demand during COVID, the height of the pandemic, was down 60%, and you can see charging demand was down more than that. But since then, the charging demand has recovered and is beyond pre-pandemic levels. In fact, October 2021 was our best month ever for EV charging. Some of the benefits of our EV charging program, you can see a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. Going back to October 2021, we had over 500 charging sessions, which resulted in over 10,000 pounds of greenhouse gas emissions avoided. And not to confuse people switching back over to metric, for the lifetime of our publicly available EV charging program, we've avoided over 58,000 kilograms of greenhouse gas emissions, which is the equivalent of almost 1,500 trees and letting them grow for 10 years. So one of the criticisms that EV enthusiasts or activists hear often is, doesn't it just give you a longer tailpipe? Well, part of pairing EVs with renewable energy is that you bring those emissions down even more. In 2020, 83.6% of the electricity delivered to Mid-American Energy customers in Iowa was from renewable sources. So that is huge in convincing people that electric vehicles really do go a long way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and combating climate change, whether it's your personal car or your bus. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
So very, very cool, Daniel. I mean, the idea of that many kilograms of carbon carbon emissions that were avoided is fantastic. I'd ask you to give me host capabilities again so I can share my screen.
Sure, let me figure out how to do that.
Sure. It's informal, informal tour.
There you go. You
So-
should have that permission back.
Thank you. So now let's travel from Iowa City to North Liberty, where Roger Egenberg is going to be sharing his experiences with his new residential solar installation. Roger is an Iowa native that graduated from Iowa State University with a degree in biology and environmental studies. He worked mainly in public utilities administration, where his career took him from Illinois to Kansas and to Nevada before he came home to Iowa to retire. So with that, I will hand it over to Roger.
All right. Hello, everybody. As Ann said, I'm Roger Egenberg. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon to share my experience with installing a solar system on my home here in North Liberty. A few weeks back, Ann contacted me and asked me if I'd be willing to be a stop on this year's Johnson Clean Energy District Tour. And although I'm sure my experience is certainly not unique in any sense, I'll try to walk you through how it went for me and present some data on the results of the past 16 months of operation. It all started back in the early pandemic days. My wife shared an invitation with me that she saw on the City of North Liberty website for an upcoming webinar sponsored by Johnson County to promote their 2020 Solarized Johnson County Group Buy program. I watched the Grow Solar presentation and decided that I'd investigate a little bit further. I contacted Johnson County to learn more about the group buy and tax incentives. I asked why they selected Eagle Point Solar for their 2020 program and how they vetted Eagle Point to make sure that they were a reliable contractor, and what steps I would need to take to participate in the program in 2020. At that point, I contacted Eagle Point Solar and initiated a request for a quote. They asked for my previous year's electrical bill statements showing my kilowatt hours consumed and the billing data. After I provided that, they used those estimates and satellite imaging to create a preliminary proposal for me that showed a layout of the rooftop panel arrays. I received the initial proposal on June 24th of 2020. Based on this proposal, I decided to proceed, and then they scheduled and did a drone flyover of my property. And from that, they created a final layout and a system sizing, completed the system sizing decisions. Let's see, where was I? Oh yeah, they delivered a final proposal to me and the contract documents on July 6th of 2020, which was just a couple of weeks after I initiated contact with them. I executed the final contract documents on July 20th. The panels and other hardware were delivered in early August and installed on August 18th, just 8 days after the Iowa derecho. I thought that the project might need to be delayed at that point because I assumed that because of all the extreme wind damage and trees and things that Eagle Point would probably be tied up making repairs to existing systems. However, they informed me that they only had a couple of systems have any kind of damage failures. So they were able to fit me right back into the schedule and They were on site on August 20th, after completing installation on the 18th to complete their system testing and things like that. They contacted Lynn County Rural Electric Cooperative, who is my electrical service provider here in North Liberty. That was scheduled. They got out within a couple of days, and the system actually was authorized, certified to go online on August 20th, which was exactly to the day 1 month after I signed the contract documents. Eagle Point handled all the city permitting requirements. They completed the Iowa state tax credit application on my behalf and scheduled the required Lynn County REC inspection and certification. The total timeline for the project from the time I initiated my inquiry until it was online was just over 2 months. Okay, so that's how I started. And you can see from the photo, I have 3 separate arrays on my roof, total of 19 330 watt photovoltaic panels. I have 5,000 unit inverter installed as part of that system. Okay, it was determined based on the previous year's consumption and the expectations for the future that it would require a 6.27 kilowatt DC system to offset 90% of my expected energy consumption. This required the installation, as I said, of 19 panels in 3 different arrays. 2 of the 3 rooftop locations were above rooms in my home that had high ceilings and therefore no attic space. So as an on-site change order, it was determined that all of the connective conduit would have to be installed on the exterior roof rather than into the attic spaces. Because of that, there was a slightly less cost for the labor on the installation of the system. So in exchange for that reduced labor cost, they actually provided me a full 25-year warranty on the entire system. The panels had initially been proposed at a 25-year performance warranty, but the inverter and the other connective equipment were projected to have a 10-year warranty. However, because of the reduced labor costs, they were able to provide me with the full 25-year warranty on the entire system. Although the contractor's warranty is 5 years, meaning that their labor would be covered for the first 5 years for any problems. Just as a sideline, when I first started talking with Ann about this system or my presentation today, I told her that it hasn't been turned off since I turned it on. Well, just a couple of weeks ago, the system went down, and I contacted Solar Edge through the indicator on the inverter panel and informed them of the problem. I also contacted Eagle Point. They said they'd just gotten a notice that there was a problem with my system. They determined what the problem was remotely, and the next morning they were here at 9 o'clock to correct some problems with the optimizers communicating with the inverter. They replaced the entire inverter unit, and I was back up again by 10 a.m. So I've had a partial day of no service since I installed this 16 months ago. And to put in a little plug, and Chris might not like the advertising for Eagle Point right here, but they did a great job. I was very pleased with the reaction to the problem and the service that they gave me. And since that time, I've had no further problems. Okay, now as far as the system cost, the total bottom line cost was $14,995, which is slightly less than shown on this screen. However, there was some adjustment made. Less the 26% federal tax credit that I received, of about $3,900 and a 15 or 13% state tax credit that I was fortunate enough to get in early enough last year in 2020 when there was still some money available for that program. So I did in fact get the 13% tax credit as well from the state. And then in addition to that, because I participated in the Johnson County Group Buy program, and the final rebate that Eagle Point gave me was based on the total number of participants in the Johnson County Grow Solar program. And that amounted for me to $567. So my net bottom line cost for the entire installed system was a little bit under $8,600. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about the results. You know, what happened after I installed this in my home. As I said earlier, the system was designed to meet 90% of the estimated 2020 electrical consumption. This estimate was based on a proposal, or was expected to equal 8,485 kilowatt hours based on prior experience. The actual consumption for 2019 was 7,946 kilowatt hours. Actual 2020 consumption was down to 7,055 kilowatt hours, or a reduction of 891, or more than 11% from the previous year. Now, this may have been primarily due to more favorable temperatures in 2020. It was also in part due to the net metering conversion that occurs from DC to AC, and the way the production consumption meter balances. So some of that savings was due to the technology that was installed, but I also believe this reduction was in part due to an increased awareness that we had of our energy use habits. When you can observe your consumption in near real time on your phone, you tend to modify your behaviors. We reprogrammed our thermostats for seasonal variations. We keep the house open whenever we can on cooler days. We wear a sweatshirt in the wintertime. We did fewer loads of laundry, fewer cycles on the dishwasher. We became more diligent about turning off our lights and ceiling fans, but not in the room. And due to the pandemic, we had no in-home guests for that period of time. The 2021 data is even more dramatic. I project that our total billed consumption adjusted for the net metering factor will be slightly over 4,000 kilowatt hours for the year, a billing reduction of almost 50% from 2019 prior to the solar installation. Since system startup, we've consumed an average of 19 kilowatt hours per day, which by the way is considerably less than the national average consumption for a two-person household. And what you can see on this screen that Ann has up here now is kind of an example of when I put the presentation together. It was November 16th and November 17th. You can see what I can see on my phone here of actual consumption until it gets daylight around 8 a.m. Then you can see the production causing me to have a net negative consumption during the sunlight periods on these days. And then after the sun goes down, you can see the spike go back up. One of the interesting things we discovered when we first started looking at this data was we could tell when the dryer turned on. We could tell when the air conditioner was cycling on and off. So those highlights made it very clear to us that where our energy was being consumed and how we might just modify behavior to correct that problem. Okay, as far as production, and again, these screens will allow us to see a little bit of that. And do we have the one for the Lynn County REC bill? is there another screenshot? I thought there was a screenshot that would show a utility bill from, nope, maybe we don't have that. I have that here, but anyway, the actual production from the most recent 12-month period, which is actually November 2020 through October 2021, was 7,816 kilowatt hours. The projected in the proposal when I first received it for that first full year of operation was 7,670. So we actually produced 102% of what the initial production estimate was. So I have to give Eagle Point another little plug there. They were pretty right on how much this system would produce. They know the weather patterns, I guess. This is an average daily production for the full year of about a little more than 21 kilowatt hours per day, which, as I said earlier, we use 19 kilowatt hours per day. So we're actually producing more than we use by about 642 kilowatt hours per month. Since startup, we've now produced about 1 megawatt more than we've used. Total system output now exceeds 10 megawatts DC since startup, or the equivalent of 15,500 pounds of CO2 emissions saved, or about 117 trees. Now, how does this production and consumption data impact my utility bills? I guess that's kind of the bottom line that people that are investigating solar want to know. As you can see from these data sheets, and again, thank Ann for doing the screenshots here, but this is a simple Excel spreadsheet that I created when we first installed the system. And the 2019 data shows what my monthly utility consumption was and what my total bill was. You'll note on these bills that there's a 22 base meter charge that I haven't been able to completely eliminate, but you can see from the data when we go to the end of the 2020 period where the system was installed on August 20th, we see the data from billing from that point forward. My utility bills, the August utility bill was $135 total. Immediately after installing the system, you can see that my utility bills dropped to less than $20, which includes the $22 base meter charge. So I'm getting some net return on my consumption. This data will show that the monthly billing, we save about $63 on average from our utility bill, or about $760 for the first full year. Total electric bill now averages $21 per month, and this includes the base meter charge of $22. The total 2019 electric bill was $1,008, as you can see from the chart. The 2021 bill will be less than $300, and this includes the $264 total base meter charge. Total electric user or usage charges for 2021 will be about $30. That's how much my entire electric utility bill consumption charge will be for the entire year. Now, without getting too numbery here, I'll just talk a little bit about how this translates to a payback for me. The return on investment analysis that I did, and do we have the next screen? Yeah, there we go. Okay. Based on a 3.8% annual energy cost increase factor, and that's what Eagle Point used in their proposal. And this also does not account for present value of money adjustment. So this is just in raw cost numbers. The total system cost, as I said earlier, was a little under $8,600. The 10-year estimated cost avoidance is $9,055. That creates a timeline for full return on this cash financed expenditure of 9 years and 10 months, down from the original estimate of 11 years and 7 months in the original Eagle Point proposal. And I'm optimistic that based on the first year outcome, I'm optimistic that this payback time period will even be less than the 9 years that it is now. Okay, I hope I haven't gotten too numbery here for you, but and I can certainly answer any questions about the data as we get into the Q&A period. But the summary of my overall experience, would I do this again? Absolutely. All aspects of this process went smoothly, and the outcome has clearly exceeded my expectations. The fact that this project has eliminated at least my household related, electrically related carbon footprint is something I feel very good about. I would encourage anyone who can to investigate doing this. Installing solar continues to get cheaper, more efficient, and more available. And I think it's the right thing to do. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions about the material during the Q&A period, or Ann knows how to contact me if anyone chooses to have some further follow-up with me regarding the installation of my project. You can see my garden doesn't look like it did when the first picture when the garden was in full bloom, but this is a picture actually that Ann just recently took when she came and made an on-site visit before the presentation. So with that, I'll turn it back to Ann.
I really love seeing numbers like that because it's not always financially feasible for the upfront cost for a lot of people when installing solar, but you make that back over the long term, and the long term really isn't all that long either. So it's always very interesting to hear from anybody that's installed residential solar, and you gave such great information, Roger. Thank you so much. So for our last tour stop of the day, we are going to be going into Coralville, where we'll be visiting the Unitarian Universalist Society there. Deb Scholerman is the green facility manager. I'm sorry, the Green Sanctuary team. She's on the Green Sanctuary team, and she's also on the land ministry team there. She's been a member for years and years. She's also presented over 20 drawdown presentations in the last 2 years over COVID. And that's a program that helps describe the 80+ science-based climate solutions to global warming. And so she is actually going to start with a pre-made video that features the entire new green facility at their campus. So I will go ahead and share that. We'll start with that.
Hello and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Society located in Coralville, Iowa. My name is Deb Scholerman. I am a member here of this congregation. I serve on the land ministry team, the Green Sanctuary team, and I was part of the new facilities committee, which was the building committee when we built this facility. As a mission-driven religious organization, Unitarian Universalists have a set of principles that guide us. The seventh principle, respect for the interdependent web of which we are a part, compels us to live sustainably and live in harmony on the planet. This motivated us to build a sustainable building. And we chose to build the greenest building possible we could. Before deciding to build a new building, though, we thoroughly explored the possibility of remodeling our our building we were in, which was 107 years old. We also looked for another building that we could purchase and repurpose. Neither one of those options were feasible. Then we happened across this partially wooded piece of 5.5 acre piece of land in Coralville, about 5 miles from downtown Iowa City, that was for sale, and we were able to purchase it. And it was just what we were looking for. Our congregation is accredited by the Green Sanctuary, as a Green Sanctuary congregation by the Unitarian Universalist National Group Association. In 2008, our Green Sanctuary team began work in laying the foundation, educating people on the importance of living sustainably and living in harmony on this planet. The main focuses were on sustainability, environmental justice, and caring for our planet. So when it came time that we were going to build a new building and start raising money for that, we had a good foundation. People understood the importance of that. We had a very successful capital campaign, and we were off to building our new building. We broke ground in 2016 on Earth Day. It took approximately 18 months to build the building. We moved in October of 2017. It was quite a celebratory day. We are very proud of our sustainable building. And I'll mention just some of the things that we included in our plan. The biggest thing is all of our energy is produced on-site and it's renewable. We use no fossil fuels. We are a net zero energy building. That means we produce more energy than we use. Any excess energy that we produce goes back into the grid. We have LED lighting throughout the building. That's low energy, of course. We have all the plumbing fixtures are low water use. We have a geothermal cooling and heating system. There are 10 heat pumps throughout the building, and that's it's a very efficient way to cool and heat this building. Our building is on one level. Along with wanting to be sustainable, we wanted a very accessible building. So we have a one-level building that's 18,455 square feet. We're very proud that we have a functional building that's fully accessible as well as being very beautiful. And we're always proud to show it off and share it with the community. We have in the parking lot 4 charging stations for electric vehicles, and we're hoping that in the near future we'll have to add more as more people move toward driving electric vehicles. We have 3 bioretention cells that manage our stormwater runoff. Those are planted with native grasses and pollinators to attract, pollinating birds and bees. One of the biggest decisions we made, I think, was to limit the size of the parking lot to 75 spaces, which usually is not enough for a Sunday morning. We encourage people to walk if they live close enough, to ride their bikes, carpool, or park in 2 nearby parking lots that are available for our use on Sunday morning. Because we limited the parking area, that left other green space for other possibilities. In the front, most of our solar array is on the ground in front of the building. On the west side, there's a beautiful labyrinth, which is on the other side of that sidewalk. This we share with the public. Anybody is welcome to use it. This finished a couple weeks ago a memorial garden, which is on the back side of the church. There's a playscape that's under construction that'll provide natural play areas for the children in the community as well as our congregation. We have trails that people love to walk on, and approximately 6 acres. We have an additional 3.5 acres that's connected, and so we have almost 6 acres of trails that people can walk on. We are continuing to learn to live with the wildlife on our land. We have deer, we have turkeys, there's a woodchuck that lives out there. We see his hole periodically, and sometimes he's waddling around. We've seen a coyote on occasion. There's squirrels, lots of birds, of course. One of the surprises we had is that the woodpeckers seem to like the peck holes on our cedar cladding of the outside of our building. So we're buying a lot of soot. So we encourage them to eat the soot instead of pecking on our building. We, as a congregation, we feel very fortunate to have such a beautiful and sustainable place that offers us many ways to interact with the natural world, as well as do our part in caring for this planet. Thank you.
I hope everybody was able to enjoy that video well. So with that, the next half of the presentation we'll be hearing from Deb specifically. So take it away, Deb.
Okay. Again, thank you for inviting me as a representative of the Unitarian Universalist Society to participate in this year's Energy District Tour. We're an all-electric building. No fossil fuels are used for heating, cooking, cooling, lighting, everything we do there. Our solar array is 429 panels, and that produces about 160,000 kilowatts per year. Based on calculations from SolarEdge, which is the software program we use to monitor production and usage, we have saved 654,588 pounds of CO2 from going into the atmosphere. That's 326 tons. We went online in May of 2018. SolarEdge has also calculated that we have planted, it's the equivalent of planting 4,946 trees, and that's about 2.5 trees a day. Based on our electric bills, we know that in a year's time, we are producing more energy than we use. So as I mentioned in the video, since 2008, we've had a green team, the Green Sanctuary team at our church. The two main goals of that team are in our older building was to make that building as sustainable as possible. And then also to show and encourage our congregants to live a more sustainable lifestyle. One of the first things we did in our old building was to have an energy audit. And we learned a lot from that and made as many changes as we could. We switched out light bulbs to LEDs. We bought some new air conditioners, window air conditioners that were more efficient. We put the plastic covering on all the windows every November. We even looked into painting the top of the roof white because it was a black roof. So we reached the point we couldn't do any more, except of it without major renovation. It took us 20 years to decide to build a new facility, and that's a whole nother story, but we're proud of what we accomplished. As I mentioned in the video, we are motivated by our 7th principle, respect for the interconnected web of which we are part. We see ourselves as stewards of the earth. We adopted the slogan, we're building the greenest church in Iowa. And for many members, that translated to, this is the right thing to do, this is the moral thing to do, this is the just thing to do. We were committed to do our part to protect the planet. We also realized that we were building this building for future generations, not just for ourselves. And our goal has always been long-term sustainability. We are committed to sharing what we have learned and being a model for others in the community. Pre-COVID, we were giving many tours to groups, to anybody who wanted to see our facility, and we hope we can do that again. So in the near future, I know that not every religious community is able to build a new facility, but I encourage you to do what you can. Individual actions add up. Create a green team if you don't already have one. If you have coffee hour after services, use reusable coffee cups instead of disposable coffee cups. Purchase recycled paper for office use. You can even get toilet paper made from recycled paper now. Replace your light bulbs with LEDs. Those are all possibilities. Request an energy audit to learn what can be done to reduce the energy in your building. Find a group of others committed to being good stewards of the planet to work with you. And I encourage you to do what you can. Thank you.
Excellent. Just such a cool facility, Deb. Thank you so much. So, so with that, that concludes our 3 tour stops. Just to recap, we went to Iowa City, where Daniel talked about the 4 new electric buses that are added to the fleet, as well as private vehicle charging options. We heard from Roger up in North Liberty about his experiences with his new residential solar installation, and then finally Deb provided us with a wonderful video, and then her thoughts on the new facility at the Unitarian Universalist Society in Coralville. So thank you to all 3 of you so much. They were wonderful tour stops. And with that, we'll move to our discussion section. If you have any questions for any of our tour stops, please feel free to ask them. Just chime in whenever you want. Or if you have any thoughts about how you could help with the help of our tour stops or our organization to help facilitate the clean energy transition in Johnson County, have at it, because we'd really like to facilitate a discussion here with everyone. And to facilitate that discussion, we have our board president, Craig Mosher. So Craig, take it away.
Hey, thank you, Ann. And thanks to the 3 presenters. That was really interesting stuff. I appreciate it very much. So why don't we just open it up? Let's start with questions or comments or issues that any of you have. What would you like to know more about or share more about that you've heard today?
Well, I guess I'll jump in. Oh, go ahead, Cheryl. If you want to start, please do.
Go ahead, Nick. You were starting out.
Well, so I do communications up here for the city of North Liberty, and we certainly have some initiatives going on. But one of the things that would be really helpful to me in my role is to have a playbook and information to really help encourage folks. One thing that's been helpful through the pandemic is I know who to turn to when I'm trying to talk about vaccinations or masking and those sorts of things. And I think when we talk about climate, we're talking about some of the exact same kinds of problems with messaging, and we're trying to get folks to do the right thing, sort of because it's good for everybody and solve a larger problem, even if it's not something that is they're individually excited about or something like that. So having access to some resources that we can use to sort of help leverage messaging that's already out there would be a really helpful thing for me in my role.
Okay, that's a great suggestion and something that we can kind of put on our agenda. So let's see, Cheryl, you had a question. Cheryl is a board member of the Energy District and was the person responsible for a massive effort in the last, 9 months or so to study the feasibility of Iowa City building out solar on a much larger scale. And Cheryl's been working on that quite a while. So I'm glad to have the report done, I imagine.
Yes, thank you, Craig. Yeah, I'm just very curious about the projections for EV in Iowa City over the next decade or however long into the future you're looking. Do you have any sense of what is expected and how much you'll be building out EV charging stations?
So as far as projections, we don't have any yet at the city level. As part of the EV readiness plan, we do have some state level projections. I don't have those numbers in front of me. However, at this point, like I mentioned in my presentation, most EV charging happens at home. We like to provide these public chargers for visitors, for commuters, and for visibility. One of the things that I'm working on, since most charging happens at home, is expanding that to rental properties. Iowa City has a large proportion of people who rent or live in multifamily housing, And traditionally, they don't have any opportunities for home EV charging in that context. So Mid-American Energy does have a rebate program for commercial EV chargers, and landlords would be eligible for that. And so the city of Iowa City is working on developing a program sort of piggybacking on that would help rebate some of the installation costs of those.
Great. Yeah, it's nice to hear that that's going forward, because rentals are one of the key elements in Iowa City, obviously, in terms of not only EV charging, but also in terms of energy efficiency. It's a real challenge to make that work for landlords and so forth. So,
right, yeah, and we don't want to leave anybody behind in this clean energy transition.
yeah. Other questions, other thoughts on this?
I did see in the chat, Cheryl, you asked another question that I believe it was during Roger's presentation. What are the electricity costs per water per hour? As well, we also had Chris chime in here at one point, which is I find fascinating. You said that the Lynn County REC has the lowest cost per kilowatt rates in our area. And you said winter rates are just over 10 cents per kilowatt for residential customers. How does that compare to what we're seeing at the other private companies? Chris, do you have any input on that?
Yeah, the REC rates are, as I said, they're the lowest that we have in our area. Mid-American will be right behind them. They're at about 11 cents instead of 10 and a quarter cents or so. But there's a pretty big leap up to Alliant Energy. If you're an Alliant Energy customer at your home, you're going to be paying between 13 and 16 cents a kilowatt hour for that electricity.
Very interesting.
And I think Cheryl asked that question in the context of the payback time period that Roger was showing to us.
Right, correct.
So that makes it more cost effective for an Alliant customer to put in solar, really, because the payback would be shorter because the cost is higher, right? So, and part of that is probably due to Mid-American's wide portfolio of wind energy, I imagine, is what's keeping their rates as low as they are, along with some IUB decisions, probably.
I might add that, as Chris said, Lynn County charges me around 10 cents or so per kilowatt hour. They only pay me about a third of that on what my net excess I'm producing. So I don't get an entire payback on that. I would also say my oldest daughter lives in Ely, and she has Alliant for her energy provider. She's just contracted to do a solar installation on her home through a local contractor there in Cedar Rapids. And she said her payback is projected to be less than 7 years. So with a little bit higher energy costs and probably some increased efficiency over even the last couple of years, and Chris could probably speak to this more than I could, but at any rate, she's going to actually have a better outcome from a standpoint of finance than I was able to achieve.
So, Deb, would you like to comment at all on the rate that you get paid for excess electricity you put onto the grid? And
Well, yeah, we're part of Lynn County REC too. UUS is, we're in that district. We have 16 solar panels on our house in Iowa City, and through Mid-America and our providers in America when we don't produce enough. And they have a net metering program, so it balances out every year.
Mm-hmm.
So as Lynn County, I believe, is monthly. And like Roger said, when we overproduce, we get paid 3 cents.
whereas with net metering, it's almost the same. So
yeah, and with net metering, yeah, we pretty much come out. I mean, we have 16 panels on our house, and it's pretty even with our production and usage every year. Yes.
okay. Kirk, you're also been involved with the UUS project. Do you have anything you'd like to add to what Deb said earlier?
No, I think she summarized it really well. It's just that getting people to think long term, which happened before we began the building project really there. It just makes sense. And for us, it was really great to see so many people really push and want us to do more as opposed to try to, we don't want to go too far. We didn't have that issue at all. People were really wanting us to be as green as we could possibly be. We wanted to shine a light on this and be a model and attract others to see that they might consider doing the same thing.
Yeah.
I would like to add to, when we were, the building project was one big budget, and the solar array was, we raised separate funds for that because the church couldn't take advantage of the tax credits because we're a nonprofit. So we were able to attract several investors who are all members of our congregation and who actually own the PPA, own the solar array. And we have a PPA, a power purchase agreement. So the solar LLC sells the power to the church, and we sell at 90% the going rate. And so then the investors were able to take advantage of the tax credits.
Ooh.
Interesting arrangement. Yeah, I hadn't thought about creating a PPA just for that purpose, but it worked, huh?
It worked, yes. Yeah.
Make a plug for Casey.
Well, you do
That's
that.
what he's doing.
Okay, you do that.
Um,
Okay. Well, I was gonna say something.
Deb's letting me crash the meeting. You may have seen an article recently with my friend Casey Cook featured.
Oh, yeah.
And Casey has made a commitment to invest in solar, and he's got the capital from his business through the years. And he can create an LLC and work with a nonprofit agency. So he, with various kinds of incentives that he gets through the LLC, he can get a small return on his investment. And then it allows a nonprofit organization to have solar power and probably save money on their power purchasing. Now, one of the things that's happening with our LLC is, since we're all the investors are members of the society, there is discussion, and it'll probably happen next year, that many of us will donate our ownership to the congregation. And so they'll no longer, at some point, the PPA will be discontinued, the power purchase agreement. They won't be purchasing power because they will own the array. And so from a perspective of the organization, it's a money saver. And from the perspective of the donors to the LLC, if you gave, let's just say you gave $1,000 and the incentives changed your donation to maybe just $300 or $400 over the course of the power purchase agreement. So it's, and I see, Janice, you're there, and that's something you guys, if you end up putting a solar array at the synagogue, is something that I'd hope you'd consider.
I told her I talked to her.
Yeah, no, we're looking into that. I'm trying to gin up a committee there, among other things. So.
Good.
Well, that's an interesting piece then. So investors in a PPA, once they've recouped the tax credit, would have an incentive to pass it on to the organization.
Yeah.
Okay. And Chris, have you seen that happen in other places? Have other PPAs done that?
Yes.
Yeah, that's primarily my role with nonprofits, municipalities and cities, is to connect those dots. Craig is a customer of ours, and we've worked with him on a few of those projects to make that happen. So while I've got the mic here, I thought I might ask, in my role as the mayor-elect of North Liberty coming up, I think that's why I was more invited here, not to be an expert in this discussion. I'm wondering if this group, the Johnson Clean Energy Group, can take on the task of circling back to what Nick's question was in the very beginning, in putting together a playbook of sorts. I know Iowa City is out in front of this, and one of my first meetings, conversations that I'll have with Mayor Teague is to, if he's still mayor then, is to look at what Iowa City is doing for their climate action. And it can be cumbersome if you're doing this from scratch. Once someone has done it, you should be able to learn from that and repeat it easier and more easily and easily. Just like this conversation that you're having with power purchase agreements, it is something that we've been able to do here in Iowa for about 5 years right now, putting in place policies and decision-making procedures that help you as a community address climate change and environmental issues should get easier as one group does it, or as one entity does that. So if I could ask to put one thing on your plate, would be to try to facilitate that, Ann, because we all have things that we've learned along the way. Roger's experience as a homeowner with solar shouldn't be unique, and his story and how easy it was to do it, some of the challenges that he faced, some of the ways that we can correct those issues and make it easier for consumers to adopt not just solar, but energy efficiencies, what you're all doing out in the community, changing out LED light bulbs. All of that are all little things that organizations shouldn't have to sit around their congregation tables and think of anew. This should be widely disseminated information. And I know that you're getting there, and I know that this is year 2 of your tour stops, and your topics will range widely. So I think it would help us all as electeds, as employees of the city, in getting this message out, because man, I never thought it would be possible. But Daniel, this is the 3rd time I've heard an electric bus conversation in the last 2 years, and I get really excited about it every time. But no one's like, we don't need an electric bus in North Liberty, but I still get excited for you. I got excited for the Quad Cities when I heard about their electric buses over there and anywhere else. So these are things that we're all wanting to get to. It's a matter of who's done it, what are the best practices, and how what can I do to help in that cause, whether I'm in the business or I'm not. I'm a homeowner, I'm a church, who have you. So I'll stop talking with that one.
Great.
No, I absolutely agree. And thank you to Nick for the idea. And I agree entirely with Chris that, there is no reason to reinvent the wheel, is there? Especially if we have precedent research going back a decade within the communities that have already been served with these different levels of energy efficiency and climate action. So Iowa City is fantastic because they got out ahead of this. The Climate Action and Adaptation Plan set out, if nothing else, than the blueprint of what needs to be addressed. It's how to address that I think could facilitate, the proliferation of the clean energy transition here and expedite it. So yeah, I absolutely agree. And it's really would be a great conversation to have again with North Liberty and all the municipalities represented in Johnson County, because if you can work collaboratively there to get to that playbook, then it's just a bing bang boom done kind of thing. So very, very cool. So
if I could add something with one of my other hats on, with my Iowa City hat, I think that this would be a really good topic with maybe John, with your organization, Ann, and others at one of our next joint entities meetings, so we can start to build consensus.
Great.
Okay.
How often tell us more about the joint entity meetings?
They meet quarterly. I can't remember, is it the county hosting the next one? I can't remember who's hosting the next one, but we all the city councils and the county supervisors and the school boards, because the schools are big potential solar energy producers as well. They have lots of buildings with lots of space. We all give them potential topics for the next meeting is. I just can't remember exactly when it is, but but it's quarterly.
Okay.
I think
Thank
that's yeah. Thank you for that, Janice.
I'll jump in and say I'll help Janice remember this the next time that meeting comes up, because we are all charged as entities to see if there's anything on the agenda to discuss, and sometimes there's heavy items that we need to discuss, and sometimes there are light and fun things that we can discuss and work on. So I'll help Janice make sure it gets on the agenda.
Well, and we would love to work with you on that. That would just be fantastic. So keep us in the loop and we'll help in any ways we can.
Well, that sounds like an excellent vehicle for moving this discussion forward, to get all those entities together at the table at one time and work on it. So let's see. Janice, you said something interesting in the chat about the quietness of buses. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I went when Iowa City had a bus here before we actually had our own buses, so that people could see what it was like. In addition to like not consuming energy, it doesn't produce noise. Or obviously exhaust. So you can stand outside of it, right next to it, and have a conversation. You can talk. You can be inside a moving bus and hear without anybody shouting from the front end of the bus to the rear end of the bus. It's just incredibly quiet. So it reduces noise pollution as well.
Great. Could you also say something about the state solar tax incentive, either you or Chris? Is there anything happening?
I don't know how much you know about it. They tried to re-up it at the end of the session last year, I believe, and I know Dave Jacoby, among others, were working on it, and it did not happen. That means that they're, I mean, I don't know how many people this has affected. I also have solar on my house, and I got in basically in time to get my state solar tax credit, but there are a bunch of people who would have had getting a state solar tax credit as part of their finance plan, essentially, who are still sitting in line and wondering how they're going to pay for that extra couple thousand or whatever they were going to get from the state. So I'm not, I would think that it's something people could encourage their representatives and state senators and during this session to re-up it.
Right.
And I think this group is largely going to be preaching to the choir when it comes to our local representatives. So the solar, renewable energies has become more political than it has practical in its application, and who's playing favorites on who gets the credit, who benefits from it. And it's a topic that, while everyone in the state of Iowa and all 99 counties in the state of Iowa have received and benefit from the tax credit, it's largely gone as the way of a political conversation here. So it just wasn't added back into the budget, as Janice mentioned. It was just done away with at the end of last year. So I'm one of those households that is on the outside looking in of that state tax credit. They were only able to fund credits from the 2021 allocation, that this was the last year of money that was put away. They were only able to allocate projects through August of 2020. So they have all of this year's folks and a third of last year's projects constructed in Iowa that just won't, as of right now, receive that state tax credit. Dave Jacoby has said, kind of quietly, that because it's an election year next year, that there may be more of an appetite at the State House to do this. So it's not necessarily us talking to our local representatives, because they are all in favor of it. It's you all with friends and family in other parts of the state talking to your legislators, their legislators at that point, and having those discussions outside of Johnson County.
Sounds like it might be the farm lobby. We need to get them engaged in this.
Yeah, that would be huge.
Yeah, that's a part of it. This morning was a meeting of the state Clean Energy Districts of Iowa board, and we talked about this exact issue and exactly what you're both saying here. That what we need to do is find people who have installed solar, who in the last 18 months or so, who aren't getting their money, and have them talk to legislators who voted against it last time and try to say, this is just not fair, so that we'll be working on that as one of our items going forward. It is past an hour and a half, so we promised to let you go. So I'd like to wrap up at this point and really thank our three presenters and our folks who attended. It's been an interesting discussion, and always fascinated to hear the ideas that come out of these conversations. So thank you all very much for being here. We'll see you next year, maybe.
Yeah,
Thanks for putting it together.
thanks for hosting.
Thank you so much, everyone.